Yesterday, in the episode part 3B, there was a glitch as we tried to wrap it up. Last 10-15 minutes, there was a glitch, so I decided to add this one and name it the final episode. We're about to talk about Iran and Afghanistan. And sure enough, only last night or this morning, Israel launched an attack on Iran. So it is quite telling. As mentioning that Iran is a nation state. It's not an Islamic state, and it's converted into a Shia state. To be fair, Afghanistan is not any different. It's also a nation state converted into a Sunni state. So why are you discussing these two countries? Because after Rashidun Caliphate, these are the first one that identify themselves as Islamic State or Khilafah. So problem with this is these two countries, if they are not careful, they will fall into the trap of Bani Israel. And I'll explain how. So before we get into that discussion, let's review on a personal level. We have discussed this before. You have to identify the problem that you had. So if you have seen or you have deviated from Islam and you want to come back, it's a very similar process as a group. So we have to recognize how we got deviated. And that's why you have to know the history. Personal history or history of the group, of the particular group that is going to cause the revolution. We have to recognize the HSSA, and that one, once more, is honey, sugar, saccharin, aspartame. The degradation, how that took place, we have to recognize that. Then we have to revert to the honey standard. But that's not enough. We have three conditions that we have to fulfill. And it's very important. If you don't do that, as a nation, as a new country, as a state, as a khilafah, will fall back. Just like if you're a drug addict and you want to come back to Islam, it's very easy to fall back unless you do these three conditions. And those conditions are giving up the sin. So you identify that was a problem. So for a nation, you have to identify how you lost the power, how ummah lost the power. So you have to identify. Then you have to regret. So it's important to know the history. Because if you did not learn from history, how would you correct it? So if you have any bias towards Shia or Sunni, or, I like this guy and I cannot say anything bad about him, or I don't want to learn any lesson, he could not do anything wrong, then you're messed up. So you cannot have any bias. You have to sincerely regret what happened. And then you have to vow that I'm not going to repeat. So for a nation, you also, I'm not going to repeat, but it also should involve change the environment, change the old habits. If your addiction was with alcohol, you cannot live in the same place. You cannot hang out with the same people. It's the same with cigarette. For a nation, it's the same. Who were your friends? If you go back to be friends with them, you're messed up. So now with that topic, let's discuss Iran. For 1,000 years, even longer, ever since Muawiyah's time, so-called Shia people were oppressed, and most of them were righteous people. As I mentioned, 10 out of 12 imams were righteous and they were martyred. But people, the ones we discussed yesterday, they held grudge. You see, Muawiyah's time started to curse Ali, even formally, officially. They were cursing them, cursing him. Even during Azan, during khutbah, officially they were cursing Ali. It is like the thing to do. Who stopped that? Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, Umar bin Abdulaziz. He stopped that. See, that's the thing. But Shia people, so-called Shia, because Shia is really a new thing, they did not stop. They were cursing Usman, Abu Bakr, Umar, everybody. So much so that in 16th century, they built a shrine for the killer of Umar. So that old habit to hold grudge against fellow Muslims, fellow oppressed, they were also in dispute. But you resurrected them to hate them. That was the addiction of Shia people. And it turned out that has not gone away. Only Imam Khomeini ordered that you cannot curse the Sahaba. They used to curse Aisha and Abu Bakr and everybody. He stopped it formally. But in terms of state, they did not change much. For instance, they are doing agreement, dealing, sinister dealing with Israel, USA. Remember Iran-Contra affair during Reagan? Why would you do that? As a nation, why would you do that? It's like somebody's addicted and they're hanging out with the same people that they're doing drugs with. So as a nation, you have to identify, you have to change every old habit. And if you don't do that, this is what you get. Now, same with Afghanistan. They were operating like a terror group. Even after revolution, they are still operating the same way. Everything hush-hush, no confidence. They are clinging on to China. If Russia offers, well, Taliban are no longer terror group, they're elated. So, wow, mashallah. Why? There's a war between Pakistan and India. They're cheering for India. Why would they do that? Why would you want to go to UN? Same way Iran made the mistake. If you read history, 1979, right after the revolution, there was a big bomb attack. They killed 70 of the leaders. But Iran was tough after that. They hanged a lot of people. But Afghanistan did not do that. Afghanistan is actually inviting the bad guys to come back in. What happened to the lesson? Recently, I saw Karzai giving a speech in graduation ceremony as a leader of Afghanistan. What happened to Iraq? So this problem that we face in the personal level is the same with nationwide. And that discussion has to take place, because we're not talking about correcting these nations slowly. If you do not identify them, you will collapse. And a new nation has to rise. You have no hope. So it's a matter of identifying your actions as a group, as a government. You have to identify all the actions. Just like in personal level, you ask, why am I doing this? Why am I making a contract with China? Is it to please Allah? Right? So literally, you have the personal one that we constructed last time applies to a nation. For every action, for every decree. You want to tax people, you have to say, why am I taxing people? Where is it allowed? You need money? Do you extort people? So this is, so now from personal to nation, we also recognize how Shaitan attacks. The moment you have decided it's a Sunni state or Shia state, Dalal has taken effect on us. We can no longer see it. Individually, the way we're addicted to sex, money, and control, nationwide, it's the same problem. Why would Iran cheer when Saddam Hussein was brought down by US? Why would he even collaborate with that? Because he loved control. He forget his control. This control is shaitanic. So as a nation, as a government, you have to identify all these four things that have destroyed the Khilafah. It was there with Muawiyah. It is there with Sisi. Every government has this problem. For an Islamic government, you have to identify this as to no, I'm not going to fall for this. If you give Shaitan a small opening, it will make a big hole. You cannot leave it small. Every time you are tempted to do that, you do astaghfirullah and go back to use your account. It's very important to, again, look at the traits of the hypocrites. Because every one of these governments, these days we have Syria, every government, I would say majority of them fall under this category. As an individual, as a government, both. It's full of hypocrisy. So it's a matter of understanding the traits of Shaitan and Shaitan's follower and say, I'm not going to do this as a government, as a group. If you don't do that, there is no point. You will not be the one in charge of Khilafah. Again, traits of Bani Israel, greediest, hypocrisy. They ask Bani Israel questions and then takfir each other. Go to Iran and you'll find out how much they hate. Every righteous group, hatred from ISIS to everybody else. Even within Shia, they hate each other. Sunni, it's the same. Go to Afghanistan, they hate the most Wahhabi, ISIS, Salafi. They hate everybody, but the most hate is among fellow Muslims. Busy doing takfir. And that's typical of Bani Israel. And the most important trait is in, again, Surah Baqarah, verse 85. They kill each other. How often you hear this? There's a bomb attack in Pakistan. There's a suicide bombing in Afghanistan. These are all Muslim groups. Muslims are their worst enemy. Some say, well, suicide bombing was good when it was Taliban doing it, but now it is bad because I said, why? Why is it different when it comes to Taliban? So because their intention is bad. You see the point? You are judging people assuming their intention is bad. You cannot assume intention. That's Allah's job. It's literally shirk to assume that somebody has a bad intention. So if you want to debate the process. No, you don't want to debate the process because you know you'd be wrong because you have done suicide bombing yourself. So when it's against you, you're saying, oh, I don't like it. So we're coming to the main point. As an individual, scholarship is seeking knowledge is the most important action. A nation, if it is led by Bani Israel scholars, you're messed up. You have no hope. So it has to be led by real scholars, and they seek ilm non-stop. What happens in reality is the same in Iran, Afghanistan, and every Muslim country. They are not asking questions. They are not seeking knowledge. They are seeking justification. So more expert you are, you see who is the biggest expert of Islam, you think, right? The Khatib of Makkah, Medina. Those are the first one to tell you that you have to obey your ruler. It has been that way since Muawiyah's time. And those are the scholars that are going to bottom of the hell. We discussed that last week. So literally we have created a situation where so-called scholars are the most ignorant. They are not only not doing research, they're anti-research. They're anti-ilm. They're anti-aql. After that, you have to understand that the thread 4 of Surah Nisa, verse 119, which Shaitan said, I will change everything. Then number 4, he says, everything natural to artificial. That degradation has invaded every aspect, in water, in clay, in intoxicant, even in intoxicants. Continuously, in energy, in immunity boosters, all of them have to be changed. You cannot just say, well, I will just use vaccine for a little bit or use toxic medicine for a little bit. Then it's not a revolution. Shaitan, remember, if you give Shaitan a small opening, he will make it big. You cannot give this a small. You cannot say, I'm a cigarette addict, but I will just have one smoke, one puff a day. Soon you're gone. Every aspect, degradation in energy, in agriculture, and these are important issues. You cannot follow Shaitan and say, well, it's the Islamic State. No, nothing can be left to Shaitan. In food, mashallah, they have no problem with artificial food. Energy drink is the biggest addiction nowadays in Afghanistan, for instance. They have no problem. Whereas those things are here. They are like the aspartame of food. In medicine, this is the most devastating one. They have iman in shaitan so deep that if you try to tell them that artificial medicine is bad for you, which is known in the West, they will attack you like you're a Salafist. You're trying to topple the government. in metallurgy, even in warfare. How many times Muslims fantasize that if we have just nuclear weapon, we're gone, we have it. They forget what happened to Pakistan. Everybody's fantasizing that we will build bigger planes, bigger bombs, completely detached from Islam. But most importantly, degradation in education, because these are the ones that will produce ulama, real ulama, not somebody who holds a degree, not somebody who cannot answer why vaccine should be haram. They do not rely on China or Russia or US. That ulama can be produced only with an education system that follows Prophet's model. You see, first university, everybody's very proud of that, was in Fez, Morocco. And what are they teaching? Instead of Quran, Hadith, and Aql and Mantiq, they were teaching Maghdoub, Maliki Mazhab. So they are literally being certified so they can give fatwa in support of the government of the time. The government was a tyrant government. Government was completely anti-Islam. It was a Pakistocracy. The most ineligible, the most incompetent, the worst enemy of Islam were the leaders. We discussed that last week. And these universities were producing graduates who would support those tyrants. But it became worse. Now you're sending your children to China, to US. See, to the credit of Afghanistan, the government recently said, if you're a government official, you're sending your kids to foreign countries, you should quit your job. They recognize that you are not sending your kids to be indoctrinated, to become an agent of Shaitan. But you have to realize that you should have this education. What they're doing education here, and they say, this is banned for women. Why don't you ban for everybody? And you start original one. It's not very difficult. You all know Quran and you all know Hadith. Why do you have to rely on anything from the West? So if you produce your graduates who are real scholars, then you have reversed the decline that started from demise of Rashidun Khalifa. It's 1400 years old problem. We mentioned about this first verse of Quran. If we started a new sin, if we started a new fitna, you carry the burden for everybody, all the sinners, for your followers until the day of judgment, without reducing their individual burden. Prophet Muhammad, as usual, complemented that with giving hope. On the other hand, if you reverse that, if you reverse the trend that has plagued the ummah for 1400 years, you get the reward until the day of judgment. How beautiful is that? If you do that, there's a graph here in, it's typically tangible values, right? The values go up. Say iron bar is like $5, horseshoe, $15 from the same rod. And if you make needles, you can make like $15,000. And if you make watch spring, you get $350,000 or something like that. And if you do that with knowledge, real knowledge, that's infinity. So if you produce new knowledge, the value is immeasurable. We're talking about $5 turning into $350,000 and a lot more. So literally million times improvement if you create new knowledge. So this is an example. If your iron bar is naturally processed, its price is high. You see, this is organic. That's why it's much higher. This is the non-organic one. So nowadays, disinformation or ignorance, the chat GPT to artificial intelligence, they're here. They're cashing in a lot of money. This is the biggest business, artificial intelligence. If you transform that into real intelligence, it would be manifold. Right away, the new nation will become the leader of the world. This is what the transformation, this is the kind of transformation we have to look at. I remember in 2003, I wrote a paper. It was to be published in a conference in Pakistan, and I wrote, if we adopt this process, in 20 years, Pakistan will become the leader of the world in technology. In 20 years. And somebody, organizer, even though they were a fan of me, they wrote back, says, sir, isn't it too much? They could not believe it. But the process is really easy. And it comes from Quran and Hadith. We'll talk about that. Real knowledge is extremely valuable. And real knowledge comes from Allah. We know even in dunya, artificial knowledge is also valuable. So don't you think real knowledge should be much more valuable? There comes the role of the university. After the demise of Caliphate Rashidin, the number of bad guys, it's a corruption ratio, right? Now, today, we have, for every good guy, you have 100 bad guys. In Prophet's time, even then, bad guys were never majority. But it was decent. Right? It was under control. But as it skyrocketed. So we have to bring down the bad guys ratio right away. So much so that we are back to collaboration time. Right? Only then we can hope that the leader of these good guys, the leader of the ulama, would be the natural Khalifa. That would be real Khalifa. But the process is called the university process that we are trying to establish. And we did establish, and inshallah, it has these following categories: Sharia, natural science, resource engineering, medical science, and military science. Bottom line is, this university will create scholars that are proficient in everything. These are the polymaths. And the leader of that, the most learned person will be the Khalifa. And he will lead the new Rashidun Khilafah. I throw that in Al-Hashr 7, Allah talks about the value of ulama. So the tangible, they belong to Allah and His Messenger. And who are the wali, who are the inheritor of Messenger today? Ulama, right? So these are not the madrasa graduates, certainly not the university PhDs. These are the real ulama that will be produced through the university that we call Prophet's University. I want you to review this, Surah Baqarah, and this is the mission statement, literally, for the university. 2:51 talks about the job description of ulama, of the scholars. They recite from the revelation, they purify, they teach from the book and wisdom. And what is wisdom? Is hikmah. Hikmah is literally Quran in the context of hadith. The ability to think. And they teach you what you never knew. New knowledge. Remember we talked about new knowledge, how it would be infinitely beneficial? That's the description. And this is the motto of the university. In his wise approach, right away Allah said, you remember me, I remember you. You thank me and never be ungrateful. Right after that verse. Then Allah advises us to be patient and connect with Allah with salah. Right after that, Allah talks about shaheed. You see, throughout history, the biggest ulama, the biggest alim, they always long to be shaheed. They did not long for getting a position. They did not long for even victory because it's not in your hand. That's not your job. Your job is not to be successful in dunya. Your job is to be successful in akhirah. And what better sign of success than martyrdom? Then Allah tells you that Allah will test you with fear, famine, loss of property, life, crops. These days, talk to anyone who has participated in jihad. They are all on easy life. So, well, I'm tired. We have fought a lot, even leaders. Now they want to settle down and go for trips. They don't want to be tested. Remember we said the moment you stop improving, you start to fall. So when it comes to real jihad, why am I saying real jihad? Because it's very easy to go out and fight and blow yourself. Real jihad, when you have all the amenities, you have all the temptation of corruption, but you're avoiding them for sake of Allah. That's when they fail. I talked about how, so these are the rightly guided people. I talked about how Allah warns, because this is a duty. If you have the knowledge, if you do not disseminate, if you do not live on it, then you fall the opposite way. Do you know who will go to hell first? It's the munafiq shaheed. You know who will go to hell next? It's not Netanyahu. Munafiq alim. You know who will go to hell third? Munafiq, very big in charity. These are real. So the warning there is they're the worst of humanity. But unless they repent, many ways make it public. If they make it public, they have recourse. How many leaders, Muslim leaders, I have heard that repented. Name any. From Muawiyah to Sisi, they have no repentance. They are like shaitan. And what happens to them? Those who disbelieve, do kufr, die in kufr, are condemned by Allah, the angels, and all humanity. For this group, same with verse 86 of Baqarah, their punishment will never be reduced. How severe it is. Only group whose punishment will never be reduced. Not only that, in 85, Allah says, their punishment with the harshest. Then we talk about not reduced, being reduced, really, the worst of anything. So it's not a choice. If you do not do that, if you have the helm, if you're not acting on it, if you're not disseminating, you fall from plus infinity to minus infinity. At no time you see these Maghdoubs ever do tawbah. So conclusion, education, real education. With education, go back to honey standard for everything. You cannot have Wall Street named to Abu Bakr Street and expect that you have made a change. Dismantle everything. Go back to the honey standard. Everything has to be changed. From personal belief, this sectarian addiction, to even indoctrination. There cannot be any ministry, government control, healthcare, and all the things that Shaitan has. You see, very important to study the history, how Shaitan infiltrated all these governments. You cannot keep them. Inshallah, with this, I have outlined the framework for creating the new Rashidun Caliphate. Assalamu alaikum.